A defining moment at the terminal. The airport buzzed with life. As travelers rushed to their gates, announcements echoed over the speakers, and luggage wheels rattled against the polished floors. Among the crowd stood 10-year-old Alicia Thomas, clutching her neatly packed bag and a first-class boarding pass. She wore a pristine dress and polished shoes, an image of poise and innocence. Her father, a powerful and respected businessman, had always taught her to walk with dignity. Yet, in this moment, dignity seemed to crumble under the weight of humiliation. As she approached the gate agent with a confident smile, the routine check-in process took an unexpected turn. The gate agent had just scanned her boarding pass when a sharp voice rang out, cutting through the lively atmosphere. "Stop. She's not boarding this flight." The voice belonged to Captain Harris, the pilot of the plane. His tone was commanding, his gaze cold. His words landed like a heavy stone in the pit of Alicia's stomach. She froze, her small hands tightening their grip on her bag as passengers turned their heads to watch. "What do you mean, sir?" the gate agent asked, visibly nervous. "Rules are rules," Captain Harris declared, his voice resolute. "A child flying alone cannot occupy a first-class seat without prior approval. Send her to the back of the line until someone sorts this out." Alicia felt a knot form in her chest, a blend of confusion, shame, and disbelief. She wanted to shrink into the ground, to disappear from the judgmental stares of the onlookers. But she knew her father wouldn't want her to retreat. "When the world challenges you," he often said, "stand tall and let your actions speak." She took a shaky step forward, her voice soft but steady. "Excuse me, sir, my father booked this seat for me. I have my ticket." The pilot's expression didn't waver. "I don't make exceptions," he replied dismissively, turning to leave. As Captain Harris disappeared into the cockpit, the gate agent hesitated, glancing at Alicia with a mixture of pity and helplessness. "I'm sorry, but I can't override the pilot's decision. Please step aside." Alicia's confidence faltered. She looked at the boarding pass in her hand, a slip of paper that now felt meaningless. Her father's influence seemed a distant shield, unable to protect her in this moment of vulnerability. She stepped back, feeling the sting of injustice and the weight of countless eyes upon her. A flashback to lessons learned. Alicia's father, James Thomas, was no ordinary man. The owner of Harlem Airlines, he was a symbol of perseverance and success, rising from humble beginnings to build an empire. Despite his wealth, he was a grounded man who believed in teaching his daughter the values of resilience, humility, and self-worth. "People will judge you unfairly, Alicia," he once told her during a quiet moment in his study. "Not because of who you are, but because of what they see. When that happens, you have two choices. Let their judgment define you, or let your actions redefine their expectations." These words echoed in her mind now, like a distant but familiar melody. She remembered watching him handle countless situations with grace, never letting anger cloud his judgment. He was her hero, a man who never allowed the world to dictate his worth. Summoning courage, determined not to give up, Alicia approached the gate agent again. "Could you please check my name once more?" she asked, her voice firmer this time. The gate agent glanced nervously at the papers before shaking her head. I can't do anything without the pilot's confirmation." "Why not?" Alicia pressed. "I have a valid ticket, and I've flown alone before." "I'm sorry, but I don't have the authority," the agent stammered, her gaze darting away. "Maybe if someone from management intervenes." Alicia felt the tears welling up but blinked them away. She couldn't cry. Not here. Not now. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, dialing the one person she knew could help. Her father. A call for justice. The phone rang twice before James Thomas answered. His deep, steady voice immediately calmed her fraying nerves. "Hello, sweetheart. Are you at the gate?" "Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The pilot won't let me on the plane. He says I can't fly alone in first class." James was silent for a moment, and Alicia could almost hear the gears turning in his mind. When he finally spoke, his tone was calm but resolute. "Stay right where you are. I'll take care of this." Relief washed over her, but it was fleeting. Passengers continued to board, their curious glances like daggers. Alicia stood alone near the gate, her polished shoes feeling heavier with every passing second. She kept her chin up, determined not to let the humiliation show, but inside, she felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The power of observation. As the final boarding announcement echoed through the terminal, Alicia noticed a man in a dark suit approaching the gate. His confident stride and commanding presence immediately caught her attention. This was someone her father must have sent, she thought. The man approached the gate agent and exchanged a few quiet words. The agent's expression shifted from nervousness to alarm, her eyes darting toward Alicia. "I'll handle this personally," the man said, turning to Alicia with a warm smile. "Miss Thomas, please come with me." As she followed him toward the plane, Alicia felt a glimmer of hope, but her journey was far from over. Inside the cabin, another confrontation awaited, a moment that would redefine not just her experience, but the perceptions of everyone who witnessed it. This was just the beginning. The weight of perceptions. The narrow confines of the airplane cabin seemed even tighter as Alicia stepped aboard, escorted by the man her father had sent. Her heart raced, each step forward feeling heavier than the last. The rows of seats blurred together in her peripheral vision, but the whispers and subtle glances from passengers pierced through the haze. The man leading her stopped abruptly in front of the first-class section. Alicia's polished shoes squeaked faintly on the floor as she came to a halt. Captain Harris was there, his rigid posture and steely expression showing that he had anticipated her arrival. "I was informed that you refused to allow this young passenger to board," the man said firmly, his tone calm yet commanding. "I'm here to ensure she is accommodated as per her ticket." Captain Harris crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. "This is not about denying anyone a seat. It's about regulations. A child flying alone cannot occupy a first-class seat without prior arrangements." Alicia clenched her small fists, standing quietly behind her advocate. She wanted to speak, to explain that she wasn't a child to be dismissed, but a person with rights and feelings. Yet the pilot's dismissive demeanor silenced her. She felt invisible, a shadow in a conversation that should have included her. The man, who introduced himself as Mr. Johnson, raised an eyebrow. "Regulations are important, Captain, but they don't override human decency. Miss Thomas has a valid ticket, and unless there is a specific violation of airline policy, this issue is not about regulations. It's about something else entirely." The cabin fell silent as passengers craned their necks to watch the unfolding drama. Alicia could feel the weight of their gazes, some curious, others indifferent. A few passengers in first class even seemed annoyed, as though her presence was an inconvenience to their comfort. Captain Harris's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping a notch. "I won't be lectured on my own plane. I have every right to make decisions I believe ensure the safety and comfort of all passengers." Safety and comfort. Mr. Johnson's voice was incredulous. "Are you suggesting this child, seated quietly with a ticket in hand, poses a threat to either, or is this about something else entirely?" A silent accusation. Alicia's cheeks burned as she realized what Mr. Johnson was implying. She had heard her father speak of such moments before, instances where people's biases clouded their judgment, where appearances spoke louder than words or actions. Was that what this was? Her heart sank further as she looked around the cabin. A middle-aged man in a business suit glared at her, as though she were some sort of intruder. A woman clutching a designer handbag shook her head and whispered to her seatmate. Even the flight attendants avoided meeting her gaze. In that moment, Alicia didn't feel like the daughter of a powerful airline owner. She didn't feel like the bright, confident girl her father had raised. She felt small, unwelcome, and out of place. A father's intervention. Just as the tension threatened to boil over, another voice entered the conversation. Deep, steady, and unmistakably authoritative. It came from the cabin door. "Is there a problem here?" James Thomas had arrived. dressed in a tailored suit that spoke to his influence, but with an expression of quiet determination. He strode forward with an air that silenced the whispers around him. Alicia's eyes widened, relief and pride washing over her. Her father had come, and everything would be okay now. "Mr. Thomas," Captain Harris said, visibly stiffening, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I'm sure you didn't," James replied smoothly, his voice low but filled with purpose. "But when I received a call from my daughter saying she was denied her rightful seat, I decided to come and see for myself." Captain Harris opened his mouth to respond, but James held up a hand, stopping him. "Before you explain, let me make one thing clear. This ticket was purchased legitimately. My daughter, Alicia, has flown first class alone on multiple occasions without issue. So, I have to ask, why today, on this flight, has she been singled out?" The power of words. The pilot hesitated, his confidence faltering under James's unwavering gaze. He stammered something about protocols and misunderstandings, but it was clear that his reasoning lacked substance. James turned to Mr. Johnson. "Thank you for escorting Alicia onto the plane. I'll handle this from here." Mr. Johnson nodded and stepped aside, allowing James to take the lead. He knelt down to Alicia's level, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Alicia nodded, though her eyes betrayed the tears she had fought so hard to hold back. "Good," James said, standing tall again. He addressed the cabin, his voice carrying over the hushed whispers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption. It seems my daughter's presence in first class has caused some discomfort, though I cannot understand why. Perhaps someone can enlighten me." The question hung in the air, a challenge that no one dared to answer. The cabin was silent, the tension palpable, a shift in perspective. Finally, a voice broke through the quiet. It belonged to an older woman seated near the front of first class. Her gray hair was neatly styled, and her expression was one of calm wisdom. "Mr. Thomas," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "I don't believe the problem is with your daughter. I believe the problem is with how some people perceive her." Her words carried an undeniable truth, one that resonated through the cabin like a ripple in still water. Heads turned, and expressions softened. The business-suited man who had glared earlier now looked down at his hands, as though ashamed. James nodded, his expression unreadable. "Perception can be a dangerous thing," he said, "but it can also be changed." Turning to Captain Harris, he added, "Perhaps you should reflect on whether your decisions today were based on policy or something else." The pilot's face reddened, and he muttered an apology, though it was clear the moment had shaken him. The beginning of change. Alicia was finally seated in her first-class seat, her father standing beside her until he was sure she was settled. Before leaving, he knelt again and whispered, "Never let anyone make you feel small, Alicia. You belong wherever you choose to be." As the plane prepared for takeoff, Alicia looked out the window, her heart lighter but her mind racing. This experience had taught her something profound, that standing up for oneself wasn't just about being brave. It was about knowing your worth, even when the world tried to diminish it. Little did she know, the events of that day would ripple far beyond the confines of that airplane cabin, sparking conversations about bias, fairness, and the power of standing tall in the face of adversity. Alicia's quiet resolve. As the hum of the airplane engines filled the cabin, Alicia sat quietly in her seat, her small hands folded neatly in her lap. Her father had returned to the terminal, ensuring she was settled before he left. Despite the relief she felt from his intervention, her thoughts churned like a stormy sea. The glances and whispers from other passengers still echoed in her mind, their judgment lingering like an unwelcome shadow. She stared out of the window, watching ground crews scurry below like ants. The vastness of the world outside the tiny plane window made her feel even smaller. But deep within her, a spark of determination began to grow. She wasn't sure how or when, but she knew she would prove herself, not just to the people on this plane, but to herself. A passenger's kindness. As the plane taxied to the runway, A woman seated across the aisle leaned toward her. She appeared to be in her late 30s, dressed in a sharp navy blazer, with kind eyes that seemed to hold a story of their own. "Excuse me, dear," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the cabin noise. "I couldn't help but notice what happened earlier." "That was very brave of you." Alicia looked at the woman, surprised by her warmth. She didn't feel brave. She felt exhausted, humiliated, and small. "I just wanted to sit where I was supposed to," Alicia said, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman smiled, her eyes softening. Sometimes doing what's right doesn't feel brave in the moment, but it's in those moments when we learn who we are. Alicia considered the woman's words, letting them settle in her mind. She had never thought of herself as someone who could teach others a lesson or inspire them. She was just trying to get by, trying to be heard. "I'm a lawyer," the woman continued, sensing Alicia's hesitation, "and I've seen many situations where people had to stand their ground in the face of unfair treatment. You remind me of some of the strongest people I've met." Alicia's cheeks flushed at the compliment. She didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded. But inside, the spark of determination grew a little brighter. An unexpected apology. Midway through the flight, as Alicia was quietly flipping through the pages of her book, she noticed Captain Harris walking down the aisle. His tall figure loomed over the narrow space, and his expression was no longer the cold mask she had seen earlier. Instead, there was something softer, almost hesitant, about his demeanor. He stopped at her row, clearing his throat awkwardly. The cabin grew quieter as passengers noticed the interaction, their curiosity rekindled. "Miss Thomas," he began, his voice low but steady, "I'd like to apologize for the way I handled the situation earlier. I was wrong to make assumptions, and I hope you'll accept my apology." Alicia blinked, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to adults admitting they were wrong, especially not someone like Captain Harris, who seemed so sure of himself before. She hesitated, then found her voice. "Thank you for saying that." The captain nodded, straightening his posture. "I also want you to know that I've spoken with the crew about ensuring this doesn't happen again. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of age or anything else." Alicia nodded again, her chest tightening. She wasn't sure if she believed his words completely, but they carried a weight that felt sincere. For the first time that day, she allowed herself a small smile. A lesson for the cabin. As Captain Harris walked away, the lawyer across the aisle leaned in again. "Do you know what just happened?" she asked, her tone tinged with admiration. Alicia tilted her head, unsure of the question's intent. "You held someone accountable," the woman explained, "not by yelling or demanding, but simply by being firm and standing your ground. That's not easy to do, especially at your age." The lawyer's words struck a chord in Alicia. She realized that her actions had not just been about securing her seat. They had become a quiet act of resistance, a moment where she refused to let someone's bias dictate her worth. The ripple effect. By the time the plane landed, Alicia felt different. The humiliation and fear that had gripped her earlier had transformed into a quiet strength. As the passengers disembarked, many smiled or nodded at her, as though silently acknowledging the role she had played in changing the atmosphere on a flight. The woman in the blazer stopped by her seat before leaving. "Keep being brave," she said, offering her a business card. "If you ever need someone to talk to, give me a call." Alicia took the card, grateful but still overwhelmed by everything that had happened. "Thank you," she said, her voice earnest. The path ahead. As Alicia stepped off the plane and into the bustling terminal, she spotted her father waiting for her. His arms were open, his expression filled with pride. "How was the flight?" he asked, his tone light, but with an undercurrent of concern. Alicia hesitated, then smiled. "It was a learning experience." James chuckled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders as they walked toward the exit. "You handled yourself well, sweetheart." "I couldn't be prouder." Alicia's heart swelled. She knew this moment would stay with her forever, not as a story of humiliation, but as a turning point. It was a reminder that no matter how small she felt, her voice and her actions could make a difference. And deep down, she knew this was just the beginning of her journey toward becoming the strong, confident person her father always believed she could be. The echoes of the incident. The drive home from the airport was unusually quiet. Alicia sat in the back seat of her father's sleek black sedan, staring out the window as the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white. She was still processing everything that had happened. Captain Harris's dismissal, the stares from the passengers, her father's timely intervention, and the unexpected apology. It was a whirlwind of emotions, and for a 10-year-old, it felt overwhelming. Her father, James Thomas, glanced at her through the rearview mirror. He could see the weight of the experience etched on her young face, a mix of confusion, hurt, and newfound strength. James prided himself on teaching Alicia resilience, but even he hadn't anticipated she'd face such blatant injustice at her age. "You've been quiet, sweetheart," James said gently, breaking the silence. "Do you want to talk about what happened?" Alicia hesitated, her small hands fiddling with the hem of her dress. "Why did he do that, Dad? I wasn't doing anything wrong. I just wanted to sit in my seat." James sighed deeply. It was a question he'd grappled with his entire life, one he'd worked hard to shield his daughter from. But now, the world had forced her to confront it head-on. "Sometimes, people let their assumptions guide their actions," he said carefully. "It's not fair, and it's not right. But when you encounter those moments, it's important to remember that their judgment doesn't define who you are." Alicia nodded slowly, her mind replaying the scene in the airplane cabin. "I tried to stand up for myself, but I felt so small." "You did exactly what you should have," James reassured her. "Standing up for yourself doesn't mean you won't feel scared or hurt. It means you face those feelings and act anyway. That's courage, Alicia. A lesson in legacy." Back at home, James guided Alicia to his study, a room filled with books, awards, and mementos from his life and career. He pulled out a leather-bound photo album from a shelf and placed it on the desk. Alicia climbed onto the chair beside him, her curiosity piqued. "I want to show you something," James said, flipping through the pages. The photos depicted moments from his childhood, pictures of a modest home, his parents working tirelessly, and a younger version of himself standing proudly in front of a rundown airplane hangar. "Do you know what this is?" James asked, pointing to the hangar. Alicia shook her head. "This is where it all began," he said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "My first job was cleaning planes. I was just a little older than you are now. People didn't take me seriously because of where I came from, how I looked, or how little I had. But I didn't let that stop me." He turned the page, revealing a photo of himself in his first pilot's uniform. "I worked hard, Alicia. And every time someone told me I didn't belong, I worked harder. Eventually, I wasn't just cleaning planes, I was flying them. And now," he gestured around the room, a testament to his success. Alicia's eyes widened as she absorbed his story. "Did people treat you like Captain Harris treated me?" James hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, they did. And worse. But I didn't let their opinions hold me back. I used those moments as fuel to prove them wrong." Alicia's growing determination. That night, as Alicia lay in bed, her father's words replayed in her mind. She thought about the lawyer on the plane, the passengers who had stared, and the captain's reluctant apology. Each interaction seemed to carry a lesson, one she hadn't fully understood in the moment but was beginning to grasp now. She realized that the world wouldn't always be fair, and there would be times when she'd have to fight for her place. But if her father could overcome his challenges and rise above the judgment of others, so could she. Before drifting off to sleep, Alicia made a quiet promise to herself. She wouldn't let this experience define her in a negative way. Instead, she'd use it as a stepping stone to grow stronger, braver, and more determined. A ripple of change. The next morning, as Alicia prepared for school, James received a phone call from an unexpected source. Harlem Airlines corporate office. Word of the incident on the plane had spread, thanks in part to a passenger who had filmed the exchange and shared it on social media. The video, titled 10-Year-Old Stands Up to Airline Bias, had gone viral overnight. James listened intently as the company's spokesperson explained the situation. The video had sparked a massive online debate, with people praising Alicia's courage and calling out the airline for its handling of the situation. Public opinion was overwhelmingly in Alicia's favor, and the company was eager to address the issue before it caused further damage. "We'd like to issue a public apology and ensure this never happens again," the spokesperson said. "We also want to commend your daughter for her bravery." James thanked the spokesperson but made it clear that actions spoke louder than words. "An apology is a start," he said, "but I want to see real changes in policy and training. No one, especially a child, should have to go through what my daughter experienced." Alicia's first step forward. Later that day, James sat Alicia down and explained the situation. He showed her the video and the supportive comments pouring in from people around the world. "You've inspired a lot of people, Alicia," he said. "Your actions have started a conversation that could lead to real change." Alicia felt a mix of emotions: pride, disbelief, and a lingering sense of responsibility. "What do we do now?" she asked. James smiled. "Now we make sure this moment isn't forgotten. You have a voice, Alicia, and it's stronger than you think. If you're ready, we can use this opportunity to help others who might face the same challenges." Alicia nodded, her determination solidifying. "I'm ready, Dad." And with that, a new chapter in Alicia's journey began, one where she wouldn't just stand up for herself, but for others as well. The spark of advocacy. The following days felt surreal to Alicia. At school, her classmates approached her with wide-eyed curiosity, some even showing her the viral video on their phones. "You're famous," one of them exclaimed. Alicia didn't feel famous. She felt exposed. It was strange to see such a personal moment played out for the world to analyze, praise, and critique. At home, her father's phone rang nonstop. Journalists, advocates, and even politicians wanted to weigh in on the incident. James Thomas, a man used to navigating the world of business, now found himself in the unexpected position of being a father at the center of a global conversation about fairness, bias, and resilience. For Alicia, the sudden attention was overwhelming. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and the idea of becoming a symbol for change felt daunting. But her father reminded her that this was an opportunity to turn a painful experience into something meaningful. A media moment. One evening, James sat Alicia down in the living room. "Alicia," he began, his tone serious but kind. "A journalist from a major network has requested an interview. They want to hear your story in your own words." Alicia's stomach twisted with nerves. "Me? On TV?" she asked, wide-eyed. James nodded. "You don't have to do it if you're not ready. But if you're willing, this could be a chance to show others that even young voices matter." Alicia thought for a moment. The idea scared her, but it also excited her. She remembered the lawyer on the plane telling her she had inspired others. If this was her chance to help more people understand the importance of standing up for what's right, she wanted to try. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady. The interview. A few days later, Alicia found herself sitting on a studio couch under bright lights. The host, a kind-looking woman in a crisp blazer, greeted her warmly and guided her through the process. James sat just off camera, his presence a steadying anchor for Alicia. As the interview began, the host asked Alicia to describe the incident in her own words. Alicia spoke slowly, her voice gaining confidence as she recounted the events. She explained how she felt when the pilot dismissed her, the confusion and hurt she experienced, and how her father's lessons about standing tall helped her find her courage. "What would you say to other kids who might face situations like this?" the host asked. Alicia paused, choosing her words carefully. "I tell them not to give up. Even if you feel small or scared, You can still speak up. You're not just standing up for yourself. You're showing others they can stand up too." The audience clapped, and Alicia felt a swell of pride. She realized that sharing her story wasn't just about reliving a painful memory. It was about planting a seed of change in the hearts of others. A movement begins. After the interview aired, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Emails and letters poured in from people around the world, many of them sharing their own experiences of injustice. Some were parents thanking Alicia for being a role model for their children. Others were individuals inspired to confront biases they had faced in their own lives. James noticed a shift in Alicia. She seemed more confident, more aware of the power her voice carried. "You're making a difference, Alicia," he told her one evening as they read through the letters together. One letter, in particular, stood out. It was from a young boy named Marcus, who wrote about being excluded from a school club because of his background. "When I saw your video, I realized I didn't have to accept what happened," he wrote. "I talked to my teacher, and now they're changing the rules so everyone can join." Alicia's eyes welled with tears as she read Marcus's words. "Dad, this is what you meant, isn't it? Using my voice to help others." James nodded, his own eyes glistening with pride. "Exactly, sweetheart. A call to action." As the weeks passed, Alicia and James began working together on a project they called the Belonging Initiative. The goal was simple: to create resources and platforms where children and adults could share their stories, learn about fairness, and find support to stand up against injustice. James used his business connections to gather funding, while Alicia became the initiative's youngest ambassador. She attended events, spoke at schools, and even helped design a website where people could submit their stories and connect with others facing similar challenges. At first, Alicia was nervous about speaking in front of large groups, but she quickly found her stride. Her youth and authenticity made her a compelling speaker, and audiences listened intently as she shared her experiences and the lessons she had learned. Confronting the past. One day, while preparing for a school assembly where Alicia was scheduled to speak, she received unexpected news. Captain Harris, the pilot from the incident, had reached out through the airline. He wanted to meet with her. Alicia's initial reaction was a mix of surprise and hesitation. Why now? Hadn't his apology on the plane been enough? But her father encouraged her to consider it. "Sometimes," he said, "a second conversation can lead to real understanding." When the day of the meeting arrived, Alicia sat across from Captain Harris in a small conference room at the airline's headquarters. He looked different, less stern, more vulnerable. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Captain Harris broke the silence. "I owe you more than an apology, Alicia," he began. "That day on the plane, I let my assumptions guide me, and I was wrong. Since then, I've done a lot of thinking and learning. Your story opened my eyes to biases I didn't even realize I had." Alicia listened quietly, her hands clasped in her lap. She could sense the sincerity in his words, and it softened some of the hurt she had carried. "I'm working with the airline to improve our training," Captain Harris continued. "We're making changes to ensure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Alicia nodded, her voice steady but kind. "I appreciate that. I hope you'll keep listening to people's stories. It's the best way to understand what needs to change." The meeting ended with a handshake, and for the first time, Alicia felt closure. She realized that change didn't always happen overnight, but it could start with a single moment of understanding. A new purpose. As Alicia and her father drove home, she looked out the window at the city skyline. For the first time since the incident, she felt a sense of peace. She had faced her fears, used her voice, and seen the beginnings of change. But she also knew this was just the start. There were more stories to hear, more lessons to learn, and more voices to amplify. And Alicia was ready to be part of it all. Planting seeds of change. The meeting with Captain Harris left Alicia with mixed emotions. On one hand, she felt a sense of accomplishment. Her voice had prompted real change within the airline. On the other hand, she realized how deeply ingrained biases could be, even in people who didn't see themselves as prejudiced. It was a lot for a 10-year-old to process, but Alicia's determination only grew stronger. Over dinner that evening, she shared her thoughts with her father. "Dad, I don't want this to be just about what happened to me. I want to help other kids who feel like they don't belong." James smiled, pride evident in his eyes. "That's a big goal, sweetheart, but I think you're more than capable of achieving it." Alicia's mind raced with ideas. What if we create a program at schools, like workshops or assemblies where kids can talk about their experiences and learn how to stand up for themselves and others? James nodded thoughtfully. "That's a great idea. And you could speak at some of those workshops. Your story has already inspired so many people." Taking the first steps. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning. James used his connections to arrange meetings with school administrators, community leaders, and organizations that supported youth empowerment. Alicia, despite her age, took an active role in these discussions. She shared her vision for a program that would teach kids about courage, empathy, and advocacy. One of the first schools to adopt the program was Alicia's own elementary school. The principal, impressed by Alicia's maturity and passion, invited her to help design the curriculum for a school-wide assembly. Alicia worked tirelessly, brainstorming activities and crafting a speech that she hoped would resonate with her peers. When the day of the assembly arrived, Alicia stood backstage, clutching her cue cards. The sound of chattering students filled the auditorium, and for a moment, doubt crept in. What if no one listened? What if she stumbled over her words? Her father knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've already proven how strong you are, Alicia. Just speak from the heart, and they'll hear you." Alicia took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The room fell silent as she began to speak. Alicia's speech. "Hi, everyone." Alicia started, her voice trembling slightly but growing stronger with each word. "My name is Alicia Thomas, and I want to tell you a story about something that happened to me a few weeks ago." She recounted the incident on the plane, describing how it made her feel and what she learned from the experience. But instead of focusing on the negative, Alicia emphasized the importance of standing up for yourself and treating others with kindness. "Sometimes, people will make assumptions about you," she said, her voice steady now. "They might think you don't belong because of how you look, where you come from, or even how old you are. But that doesn't make them right, and it doesn't mean you should stay silent." Alicia paused, scanning the room. She saw her classmates watching her intently, their expressions a mix of curiosity and admiration. "You have a voice," she continued. "It doesn't matter how small or scared you feel. You can use your voice to make a difference. And when you stand up for yourself, you're also standing up for others who might feel the same way." The room erupted in applause as Alicia finished her speech. She felt a wave of relief and pride, knowing she had reached her audience. Building a movement. The success of the assembly inspired other schools to invite Alicia to speak. She became a voice for kids who felt overlooked or underestimated, sharing her story and encouraging them to find their own strength. With each event, Alicia's confidence grew, and so did the reach of her message. The Belonging Initiative also gained traction. Schools, community centers, and even corporations reached out, eager to collaborate on programs that promoted diversity, inclusion, and fairness. James worked tirelessly behind the scenes, but it was Alicia's story that became the heart of the movement. One day, while reviewing emails with her father, Alicia came across a message from a teacher in a small town. The teacher explained how one of her students, inspired by Alicia's story, had started a kindness club at their school. The club encouraged students to share their experiences, support one another, and advocate for positive change. Alicia beamed as she read the email. "This is what I wanted, Dad, for other kids to feel like they can make a difference." James smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "And you've done exactly that, sweetheart. A vision for the future." As the weeks turned into months, Alicia continued to balance her schoolwork with her growing role as an advocate. She met with community leaders, appeared on panels, and even spoke at a youth empowerment conference. Each experience taught her something new about herself and the world around her. But Alicia knew there was still much work to be done. She had seen firsthand how deeply biases could impact people's lives, and she was determined to be part of the solution. With her father's support and her own unwavering resolve, Alicia envisioned a future where every child felt valued, heard, and empowered. And as she lay in bed one evening, reflecting on everything she had accomplished, Alicia smiled. She was just getting started. Turning pain into purpose. Months had passed since Alicia's experience on the airplane, but the impact of that day continued to ripple through her life. What had begun as a moment of humiliation had transformed into a powerful journey of advocacy and empowerment. Yet, Alicia was beginning to understand that creating real change required more than just speeches and workshops. It required action, persistence, and the ability to confront deeper challenges. One day, while working on ideas for her belonging initiative with her father, Alicia's school principal called their home. The principal had an unexpected request. "Alicia," she began, her voice steady but warm, "there's a student who's been having a hard time at school. He's been dealing with some bullying because of his background. I think you might be able to help him." Alicia blinked, caught off guard. "Me?" "Yes," the principal said. "You've inspired so many students here already. I think you're the right person to talk to him." Alicia hesitated, unsure of how she could help someone facing such a personal struggle. But her father's voice echoed in her mind. "When the world challenges you, stand taller." She nodded. "Okay, I'll try." Meeting Marcus. The next day, Alicia met Marcus in the school library. He was a shy boy from a nearby neighborhood, new to the school, and painfully aware of how different he looked compared to many of his classmates. His shoulders were hunched as he sat at the table, his eyes fixed on the cover of a book he wasn't really reading. "Hi, Marcus," Alicia said, taking the seat across from him. "I'm Alicia. The principal told me you might want to talk." Marcus glanced at her, his expression guarded. "What for?" Alicia smiled gently. "Because I know what it's like to feel like you don't belong. I thought maybe we could help each other." For a moment, Marcus said nothing. Then his shoulders relaxed slightly, and he set the book down. "You mean what happened to you on the plane?" he asked quietly. Alicia nodded. "Yeah, it wasn't easy, but it taught me a lot about standing up for myself. And it also showed me that it's okay to ask for help." Marcus hesitated before speaking again. "I just don't get why people care so much about where I'm from, or what I look like. I didn't do anything to them." Alicia's heart ached for him. "It's not about you, Marcus. It's about what they don't understand. But that doesn't mean you should let them make you feel small. You're allowed to take up space, just like everyone else." A new ally. Their conversation marked the beginning of a friendship that would change both of their lives. Alicia encouraged Marcus to join her kindness club at school, where students met to share their experiences and discuss ways to create a more inclusive environment. At first, Marcus was hesitant, but with Alicia by his side, he began to open up. One day, during a club meeting, Marcus shared his story with the group. He talked about the bullying he had faced and how it made him feel invisible. His voice trembled, but Alicia gave him a reassuring nod, and he pushed through. When he finished, there was a moment of silence. Then, one of the other students spoke up. "That's not okay," she said. "No one should be treated like that." Others chimed in, offering words of support and sharing their own stories. For the first time, Marcus realized he wasn't alone. The club became a safe space for him and many others, a place where they could find strength in each other's company. A bigger platform. As Alicia's Belonging initiative grew, it began attracting attention from organizations outside her school. A nonprofit focused on youth empowerment invited her to speak at their annual conference, and Alicia saw it as an opportunity to expand her message beyond her local community. The conference was held in a sprawling convention center filled with students, educators, and community leaders from across the country. Alicia, standing backstage with her father, felt a familiar wave of nervousness. But this time, she also felt a deep sense of purpose. When her name was announced, Alicia stepped onto the stage, her heart pounding. The audience was massive, far larger than the school assembly she was used to. She took a deep breath and began. "Hi, everyone. My name is Alicia Thomas, and I'm here to talk about belonging." She shared her story, her voice steady and clear. She spoke about the importance of standing up for yourself, of finding allies, and of creating spaces where everyone feels valued. She highlighted the work her club was doing at school and encouraged others to start similar initiatives in their own communities. By the time she finished, the audience was on its feet, applauding loudly. Alicia felt a surge of pride, not for herself, but for the movement she was helping to build. A national conversation. After the conference, Alicia's story gained even more traction. News outlets covered her speech, and social media buzzed with praise for her courage and wisdom. But along with the praise came challenges. Some people criticized her, questioning why a child was leading such an important conversation. Others dismissed her as a symbol rather than a true advocate. The criticism stung, but Alicia leaned on her father and her growing network of supporters for guidance. "Not everyone will understand what you're trying to do," James told her. "But that doesn't mean your work isn't important. Keep going, Alicia. You're making a difference." She took his advice to heart, focusing on the positive impact she was having rather than the negativity. For every critical comment, there were dozens of messages from people who felt inspired by her story. Marcus finds his voice. Meanwhile, Marcus was flourishing. Encouraged by Alicia's example, he began taking on a leadership role in the Kindness Club. He organized events, mentored younger students, and even gave a speech at a school assembly, a moment he once thought impossible. "I used to think I didn't belong here," Marcus said during his speech. "But now I know that belonging isn't about fitting in. It's about being yourself and finding people who accept you for who you are." Alicia watched from the audience, her heart swelling with pride. Marcus's growth was a testament to the power of resilience and support, and it reminded her why she had started this journey in the first place, planting seeds for the future. By the end of the school year, Alicia's Belonging Initiative had expanded to other schools in the district. Students and educators alike embraced the program, and Alicia began receiving invitations to collaborate with organizations across the country. Though she was still young, her vision and determination had sparked a movement that was changing lives. One evening, as she and her father reflected on everything they had accomplished, Alicia turned to him and said, "Dad, I feel like this is just the beginning." James smiled, his pride evident. "It is, sweetheart, and I can't wait to see where it takes you." With renewed determination, Alicia looked toward the future. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but she also knew she wasn't alone. She had her voice, her allies, and her unshakable belief in the power of belonging. And with those tools, she was ready to change the world. A movement beyond borders. Alicia's life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. What began as a humiliating moment on an airplane had grown into a nationwide movement for inclusion and belonging. At just 10 years old, she had become the face of a campaign that inspired children and adults alike. But Alicia knew her work was far from over. If anything, her growing platform only deepened her sense of responsibility. Her father, James, had encouraged her to dream big, but even he was surprised when Alicia came to him with her next idea. "Dad," she began one evening, her voice tinged with both excitement and apprehension, "what if we take the Belonging Initiative global?" James raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Global, huh? That's a bold idea, sweetheart. What do you have in mind?" Alicia unfolded a sketch she had drawn on a piece of paper. "I was thinking we could partner with schools in other countries. We could create a program where kids from different places can share their stories and learn about each other's cultures. It could be called the Global Voices Project." James leaned back in his chair, a smile spreading across his face. "That's ambitious, Alicia. But I think it's exactly the kind of vision this world needs. Building bridges across cultures. With her father's help, Alicia began reaching out to international organizations and schools. Her story had already gained attention overseas, so it wasn't long before she received responses from educators and community leaders eager to collaborate. One of the first partnerships came from a school in Nairobi, Kenya. The principal, Ms. Aching, wrote to Alicia about her students' experiences with exclusion and how they often felt disconnected from the rest of the world. "Your initiative is inspiring, Alicia," Ms. Aching wrote. "Our students would love the opportunity to share their stories and learn from others. I believe this project could help them see that they are part of a larger, connected world." Alicia was thrilled. She and her father worked tirelessly to create the framework for the Global Voices Project, designing virtual exchange programs, storytelling workshops, and collaborative activities that would bring students together across continents. The first global exchange. The pilot program launched with a virtual meeting between Alicia's school in New York and Ms. Aching's school in Nairobi. Students gathered in their respective classrooms, staring curiously at the faces on the large screens in front of them. Alicia, acting as the host, welcomed everyone. "Hi, everyone. My name is Alicia, and I'm so excited to meet all of you. Today, we're going to share our stories and talk about what belonging means to us." At first, the students were hesitant, unsure of how to connect with people so far away. But as Alicia guided the conversation, something remarkable happened. One by one, the students began sharing their experiences, moments of feeling different, times when they stood up for themselves, and dreams of a world where everyone felt included. A boy from Nairobi named Juma shared how he loved drawing, but often felt discouraged because others teased him for being different. "I used to hide my sketches," he said, "but now I want to show them to the world." A girl from New York named Emily responded, "I love drawing too. Maybe we can share our art with each other." The exchange ended with smiles, laughter, and a promise to keep in touch. For Alicia, it was a powerful reminder of the universality of human connection. Despite their differences, the students had found common ground in their stories. A growing network. The success of the pilot program sparked interest from schools in other countries. Soon, Alicia was connecting with students from India, Brazil, Australia, and beyond. Each new partnership brought fresh perspectives and stories that enriched the Global Voices Project. One of the most impactful exchanges took place between a school in Japan and a school in South Africa. During a virtual workshop, students discussed the unique challenges they faced in their communities. A boy from South Africa spoke about the lingering effects of apartheid, while a girl from Japan shared her struggles with societal expectations. By the end of the session, the students realized that, despite their vastly different histories and cultures, they shared a common desire: to create a world where everyone felt valued. Recognition and challenges. As the Global Voices Project grew, so did Alicia's visibility. She was invited to speak at international conferences, including a prestigious summit on youth leadership at the United Nations. Standing before an audience of world leaders, Alicia delivered a speech that left the room in awe. "Belonging isn't just about where you're from or what you look like," she said. "It's about being seen, being heard, and knowing that your story matters. If we want a better world, we need to start by listening to each other." The speech went viral, and Alicia became a symbol of hope for a generation hungry for change. But with the praise came challenges. Critics questioned whether a child could truly lead such a global movement, while others dismissed her work as idealistic. Alicia leaned on her father and her growing network of supporters to navigate the criticism. "Not everyone will see the value of what we're doing," James reminded her. "But that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Keep your focus on the people who believe in this mission." A legacy in the making. By the time Alicia turned 11, the Global Voices Project had reached more than 20 countries. Thousands of students had participated in the program, sharing their stories and building bridges across cultures. Alicia continued to balance her schoolwork with her role as a leader, often spending evenings brainstorming new ideas and weekends attending events. One day, while reviewing feedback from a recent workshop, Alicia received a letter from Juma, the boy from Nairobi who had shared his love of drawing during the first exchange. Enclosed with the letter was a sketch he had created, a vibrant, colorful depiction of students from around the world holding hands. "Thank you for helping me believe in myself," Juma wrote. "This is for you. I hope it reminds you of what you've done for all of us." Alicia held the sketch close, tears welling in her eyes. She knew she had found her purpose, not just in advocating for belonging, but in empowering others to do the same. The road ahead. As Alicia sat in her room that evening, she thought about how far she had come since that day on the airplane. What began as a moment of humiliation had blossomed into a global movement, one that showed no signs of slowing down. But Alicia also knew there was still much work to be done. Biases and barriers wouldn't disappear overnight, and there would always be challenges to face. Yet, she felt ready to keep listening, learning, and leading. With her father's unwavering support and the stories of countless students fueling her determination, Alicia looked toward the future with hope. She was no longer just a 10-year-old who had been judged unfairly on a plane. She was a change-maker, a connector, and a voice for a world where everyone belonged. And she was just getting started.